If not for the difference in height and build, people could have mistaken Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre for twins. Joined at the hip musically and business-wise, with Snoop as the rapper and Dre as a producer and both on Death Row Records, the duo is responsible for the albums that established and confirmed Los Angeles and, by extension, the West Coast as the dominant geographical force of hip-hop during the first half of the 90s. But when Dre left a slowly crumbling Death Row early in 96, he also left Snoop in the lurch. Dre had been Snoop's only producer, which had led detractors to theorize that, as nice as Snoop Dogg obviously was, he was toast without Dre in his corner. Like a baby learning to graduate from crawling to walking, Snoop had to figure it out himself. There were the initial stumbles, but by the 2000s Snoop had settled into his phone list of sonic specialists, who occasionally boosted him to produce some of his best work within the middle of the decade. Yeah, Dre might show up every now and then, but for most of Snoop's career, you were far more likely to spot names like DJ Battlecat, The Neptunes, or Pharrell himself, Fredwreck, High Tech, Knots, and Terrace Martin than the Doctor himself. And that makes the announcement that Dre was going to produce an entire Snoop album a monumental event. That hadn't happened since 1993 with Snoop's debut album, DOGGYSTYLE. That was 31 years ago. A lot has happened within the past 31 years. With so much change that has occurred, what would distinguish this record from the dozens of others that Snoop has done post-DOGGYSTYLE? What's the connective tissue to a classic album beyond Snoop and Dre being on another full-length ride? And is all this just a marketing gimmick down to the album name, Missionary, that's supposed to evoke memories of Snoop's debut and the height of the G-Funk era?
I don't know what the I don't know it took this long for us to circle back and get down, but we in there now.
It's 2024. Snoop Dogg is now owner of Death Row, the company to which he was signed, then escaped from, and almost 2 decades later, rescued from a string of financial transactions post-bankruptcy. And it wasn't like Snoop was not already a boss himself before then, since in '95 he founded his vanity label, DOGGYSTYLE Records, under which he pushed most of his material. But owning Death Row, after years of turbulence between him and his former owner, Suge Knight, was an event worth celebrating, and that aura became the theme of 2022's Back on Death Row, or BODR, Snoop's 19th studio album. So, anyone expecting a return to the days of the Chronic or DOGGYSTYLE is being unrealistic. Snoop is no longer the shy, lanky kid from the LBC, and G-Funk's time came and went. Instead, we have a man who has become a much bigger celebrity than rapper, basking in his success as a businessman that has transcended rap. If anyone is looking for the direct ancestor of Missionary, it's its immediate predecessor, BODR. If BODR was a victory lap, then Missionary is the afterparty, with Snoop's mentor, Dre, fully in attendance. And now to Dre. We all know he's a legend, but he didn't go into this alone. Almost 20 people, some of whom have grown as frequent Snoop collaborators, and even one a leftover from the G-Funk era, are on board here. This adds to the grandiosity of the event, which is orchestrated by a producer known for the orally theatrical. The interpolation of the stylistics People Make the World Go Round and Ahmad Jamal's Swahili Land in the opening tracks, Foreplay and Shangri-La respectively, makes Missionary feel like a soundtrack to a star-studded Hollywood flick. Not too far behind are the soaring Latin trumpets of Skyscrapers, which has a pretty good Method Man verse by the way, the rolling soul of The Negotiator, and Sticky Situation, which rides on the same Isaac Hayes-fueled sample made famous by Public Enemy's Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos, before breaking down into an electric guitar-driven jam session. There's a sonic quality, a crispness and finishing to Dre's sound that no other rap producer on earth has been quite able to replicate. But it's not enough to produce dope stuff. Would it match with what the rapper has? Snoop Dogg's biggest selling point has always been his voice. We have been in love with it ever since he unveiled that laconic drawl, traced to parents that uprooted from Mississippi in 1992's Deep Cover. Rarely discussed, though, is his improved technical proficiency over the years. He now occasionally spits in multi-syllables and internal rhyming, and there's something about working with Dr. Dre again that has revitalized his flow over the blandness of his last few releases. And while the gangster rap tropes are no longer convincing, he's now a grandpa, coaches youth football, and cooks with Martha Stewart for goodness sake. At least they are offset by his deserved proclamations of his achievements and greatness. So obviously, that's a good thing. The bad news is that a lot is thrown Snoop Dogg's way. Some of the songs, such as Hard Knocks, Gangsta Pose, and the previously mentioned Sticky Situation, switch from one beat to the next. Just when you think you're getting into the groove, the whole scene changes. Snoop and Dre should have just made 2 songs instead of one. In other songs, there's too much going on. While the grandiosity of Foreplay and Shangri-La is understandable because they're launching pads for the album's listening experience, they do feel a tad overproduced. The general overabundance of guests is questionable, even though BJ the Chicago Kid, Coco Sarai, and Janae Aiko do enough to be recognized. Most of their contributions are so subtle that they don't even justify being included in the main credits. Even Snoop's longtime associates falter. Guns and Smoke, which lifts bits of Biggie's vocals from Dead Wrong and stands out with its slow burn of DJ Rogers' Say You Love Me, nevertheless finds 50 Cent stumbling over a triple cadence flow, and Eminem with a stilted delivery that sounds like someone endlessly pressing the numbers on a phone keypad. Sure, it's a Snoop party, but the party is crowded to the extent that you begin to wonder whether Snoop, as gregarious as he is, feels like it's his. And then there are moments where these demerits lead to disasters. Another part of me is an interpolation of the Police's Message in a Bottle, a 1979 guitar classic that may sound good on paper as a gangster rap remake. Instead, you have Snoop trying to be a rock star, the Police frontman Sting trying to be a gangster rap singer, and Dre, who bookends the event as the master of ceremonies, oblivious of the stadium rock scene devolving into disconnection. Preceding another part of me is Last Dance with Mary Jane, another track inspired by a rock song. This time, Tom Petty and Heartbreakers' Mary Jane's Last Dance. Now, the song's cryptic lyrics have always been open to various interpretations since its release in 1993. But here, Snoop went with the simplest version, one that obviously makes the most sense to him. He only has one verse, a rundown of his love affair. It feels rushed and poorly summarized. Jelly Roll tries to salvage the song, but it doesn't completely erase the feeling that maybe Snoop himself should have been erased from the song to leave Jelly Roll to, well, keep rolling. The better songs on Missionary are the ones that keep it relatively uncomplicated. Out of the Blue is Dre and Snoop going bars for bars and couplets for couplets, tackling a 4-bar interspersal of a section sampling Daylight Studios' Watermelon Fantasy with another section sampling Schoolie D's Saturday Night. The overall construction gives the song a cool split personality feel of drum and bass and 80s breakbeat-driven hip-hop. The piano danger of Gorgeous elevates Snoop's battle bars, while the choral sprinkles illuminates Janae Aiko, and the quiet sparseness of Pressure and the strident first half of Hard Knocks recall the best of Dre's work in the 2000s. In fact, Snoop delightfully glides on the Thank You track, interpolating the chorus from the Sly and the Family Stone song of the same name that sounds like it's from 2003. In a good way. And oh, Snoop Lion shows up with Coco Sarai in the smooth reggae snap of Fire, even though the preceding skit glued to it is rather unnecessary. If there's one song that truly encapsulates where Snoop and Dre are at, it should be Now or Never, the last Missionary track on which both men appear. With BJ the Chicago Kid singing the chorus, Snoop and Dre take turns flaunting their titanic statuses. It's very clear that neither one of these guys need to make another album, let alone one with the other, to prove anything to anyone. Look, Missionary is not going to set the world on fire. We're not expecting Drake, Kendrick, or Tyler numbers. We're talking about a guy whose most recent RIAA album certification was for the Blue Carpet treatment, back in 2006. We're not even expecting Snoop and Dre to be in their prime. That was in the 90s. But at least Missionary has to be a couple of notches above the stuff that Snoop has been dropping throughout the 2010s into the double 20s. Passable is the best way to describe Missionary, but it feels like an insult for a duo as lionized as Snoop and Dre. Perhaps too much time has passed and minimal collaboration has occurred since they lit it up, pun intended, with the Chronic and Doggystyle. Heck, the Death Row artists that showed up on the latter are not even on here. The chemistry between Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre is still unquestionable, but that's outside the studio. So, ultimately, when Snoop raps, it's me and Mr. Young just having fun in the last couplet of Missionary's last track, The Negotiator. Such words couldn't be more apt. Because sometimes in life, it's better to just remain friends.